Today we're going to talk a little bit about how we developed a strategy to empower the application teams that our team actually supports. But a little bit about Cardinal Health though. So, you put health in the name of a business and everybody automatically assumes that you're the one providing care. But Cardinal Health is not a direct-to-patient caregiving business, but we are essential to care. So we are a Fortune 14 company, but we are centered around the distribution and manufacturing of medical equipment, medical products, and pharmaceutical products. About $226 billion in revenue last year. If you've ever been to a hospital or if your family members have ever been to a hospital, you probably have used a Cardinal Health product. Whether it was Cardinal Health branded product or one of the manufacturers that we have relationships with in the distribution model. We are in 90% of the US hospitals across the US and about 60,000 US pharmacies. So as you can see, we have a very important role to play in healthcare, and data is how we get those products from point A to point B. Next slide. So as you can see from our video, this was a journey over the course of about 17 months after we actually stood up Confluent Cloud within our ecosystem. We went from having a single topic in Confluent Cloud to now we have over 58 applications that are leveraging Kafka through Confluent Cloud within our team. 31 in the pharma area, we had the 11 in the med, and a lot of growth in a very, very short amount of time. But with that presents some challenges as we continue to grow, is how do we get outside of a shared service mindset and into a more federated model, which is what one of the strategies were that when we first implemented and we first decided that we were going to continue on with event-driven architecture and Confluent Cloud, is how would we make that successful with a company that has over 48,000 employees. You saw some of the stats from before. We have a large footprint across the globe. So how did we get here? So in 2020, we decided that, hey, we have a lot of middleware technologies that are in dire need of tech refresh, which is great. We want to be current and we want to have resiliency and we want to have great security. But we also need money to get there. So how do you do that? You have to go to senior leadership and explain to them why they need to invest within those systems. They believe in investment, especially for these type of things, but they want to make sure that we have a strategy on how to use that capital efficiently and how we're actually going to make a difference. So when we looked at Kafka, were we just going to bring in an 8th integration tool, or were we going to actually change the way Cardinal Health manages its data? And that's the main thing. With a 50-year-old company that has a lot of data within it, we were a data at rest company, a lot of batch jobs. And in that, we had a lot of problem sets. So you got to imagine, we are in the business of distribution, but sometimes our customers don't have that transparency into their ordering process. So what were they doing? They were picking up a phone and they were calling customer service reps asking about the status of their orders. And by doing so, our agents then had to go and look at a Tableau dashboard. And maybe that hasn't been updated in 6 hours. So therein lies a lot of problems within our data stream. So that's when we started to understand that, hey, we need to do it a better way. We need to use Kafka for event-driven architecture. And that's what moved us into 2021 in a needs-based assessment and vendor selection, where we eventually landed on our partners Confluent. In 2022, we decided that we're going to bring this in. We're going to change the mindset of how we manage data within Cardinal Health's walls. We had to be able to do it with organizational change management. Because without organizational change management, we were just bringing in another tool. And it was going to be the new shiny object of the week. Folks were going to use it for a while, and then they would just go back to what is easy and what is well known, and therefore we were never going to be able to see a return on investment for the $8 million that they were going to invest within bringing EDA to Cardinal Health. So my team then was stood up, the event-driven architecture team. You see there's nothing in there about Kafka. We didn't want to be known as a Kafka team. We wanted to be more as consultants to come in to look at problem sets, to understand what our business units were trying to do with their data, and then how could we use that, which tool was best. So EDA was stood up, 2022 OCM began. We then partnered with Confluent Professional Services and Kinetic Edge, and with that we built a platform that was launched in March of 2023. And after that, 2023 to 2024, you saw the slide, we've been able to move it with 58 applications onboarded. A tremendous effort for a very, very rigid company that needed to become very, very flexible. Next slide.
All right. So, like Chad mentioned, it was about changing how we view and use data at Cardinal, and to really go after the digital transformation strategy and enable the kinds of changes that were needed. We recognized that we really needed to enable those outcomes through learning and performance interventions. With the federated model that Chad mentioned, it's a small team at Cardinal. Very talented team, very stretched team, but a small team. So we needed to make sure that with not having that large shared service team where you're bringing all your EDA needs into a single team to handle that for you, training is needed. That was definitely a need that came out of that. And beyond that, looking at the capabilities and performance gaps across the organization, we also had some that started within our own center of excellence. There was very limited knowledge around Kafka and event-driven architecture and streaming solution design and development at the onset of the project. So really to be able to address all of those capabilities and the performance gaps, we needed training in performance solutions. Also, just looking at the growing and evolving demand. The change management strategy that was taken at Cardinal was very successful. And so it created a lot of demand. And just looking at how to meet that fast enough with that small federated model kind of team, with the evolving demand too, as technologies are changing and all these other things are happening, that's where learning and performance interventions come into play.
Yeah, in 2023, we only had 3 senior engineers, 4 contractors, and 1 offshore resource. And now we had to solve that problem as to how we would then move this needle and start to build out in those platforms to have 58 applications addressed. So we identified that gap of if we're going to ask our application teams to adopt EDA and develop within Kafka, we had to give them the skill set and we had to give them the training. And we couldn't just afford to send everybody out to the wonderful Confluent developer classes, the wonderful Confluent administrative classes, et cetera, et cetera. We had to bring this in-house, and that's where we brought Sherry in.
All right. So looking at some of the program-wide best practices, so thinking about some of our challenges, figuring out what we needed from a training perspective, being able to deliver it fast with that growing and evolving demand. We really leveraged 4 key considerations as we were thinking about this from a program perspective. The first was considering the learner experience in the larger ecosystem. So we were looking at this comprehensively as setting up an ecosystem where we could train people to go, to be able to learn, to grow, to find resources, find information, to enable teams to do all sorts of wonderful use cases with event-driven architecture and Kafka-type solutions at Cardinal. It wasn't just about, hey, let's have a couple trainings and having that disjointed experience. We really wanted to make that cohesive and make that content that we were creating easily to access and easy to consume by the masses. We'll talk about that a little more later too. Using a human performance engineering approach. So training is a part of performance, it's an enabler of performance, but we also were careful about how we went after the solutions. Again, thinking about we had to do it quickly, we had to do things as they evolved. So when you think about performance, it's more than just training. It's your processes. It's how you document things. It's the expectations your leaders set. It's the expectations and communications and feedback loops. All of these different things go into performance. So we carefully considered that in terms of what was training that needed to be created and other solutions that we could stand up to ultimately comprehensively go after performance. Agile iterative solutions were the focus of our development efforts. So very similar, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Kanban, Scrum, all those agile methodologies out of there that software teams use and IT teams use. We do the same thing in the training and performance world. By going after those iterative solutions, you're able to get things out there faster, you're able to focus, you're able to do things when you have subject matter experts who work in sprints with you so they can prioritize things. It's really a key to that speed to delivery to get things out there as quickly as possible. And then kind of building on that too, I've talked about the evolving, changing needs over time. Thinking about the specific types of content from a training perspective we went after what could evolve over time. We weren't creating these giant training programs that just took forever to build and maintain. We've really thought with a more agile mindset about what we could do to be able to maintain it over time. So that has really allowed us to create a pretty significant amount of impactful content, whether that's trainings, videos, infographics, more just in a pretty short time frame over the last 15 months or so.
Yep. And I will say that, I came from an infrastructure background and not like, firewall stuff, but the physical layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. So I came from a waterfall approach. So one of the first things that we had to do was to get into that agile methodology to be able to have better speed to market. And that was a game changer for us. So anyone who's still, trying to muddle through with waterfall, it might be a time to change over to agile.
Or at least some sort of hybrid approach or something.
Exactly. Yeah, we're agile-ish. I mean, we try to do our best, but.
No. So in terms of the types of content and the strategy that we took from the kind of that training and performance perspective, so you think about synchronous content and asynchronous content, what's live versus what's available on demand. So let's talk about live events a little bit first. Bringing experts to the masses was a key piece of this for us. The bread and butter of our events are our tech talks. This is a Zoom webinar series that we do every couple months. They're 90 minutes. We bring in internal and external experts that have a lot of great knowledge. They've been doing use cases. We showcase success stories where teams at Cardinal have been able to leverage event-driven architecture and solutions to empower their business use cases. We've brought in Steve Howard from Confluent. He's presented at some where we've been able to tap into his great knowledge too. We've seen a lot of different topics there ranging from, I think Steve just did one on Kafka Connect. We've done data governance, if I can talk. Stream processing options is one we're actively planning right now, and we've seen a lot of success. I mean, we've got about 1,800 on our distribution list for these. Yep. We see an average of about 200 attendees attend live. If you look at all the recordings that we've posted from our past ones, there have been over 4,000 views of them. Good survey data, but it does take time to do these and plan these and execute these and put the presentations together and to train people. So that's also where it's important to invest in targeted training. We talk a lot about the ROI, what makes sense to do in-house versus what makes sense to send someone to a Confluent training, and we've done that as well. So it's really important to make those investments. When we do events too, we also think about multiple goals. So rather than just educating on X or sharing information about X, we try to get the most bang for our buck out of that 90 minutes in the planning of those. We have polls where we're asking for information, we're getting feedback, we're constantly making sure that we're hitting the mark and reaching as many people as possible. We're using those for opportunities to identify people to work with us on developing future training and having future presentations. Showcasing possibilities. There's a lot of different facets that we look at when we do events where it's not just, hey, let's have a presentation and move on. And then finally, with our live events, promotions are huge. And we'll talk about communications in just a little bit, but just to kind of start on this, we use a multi-channel approach, and our events are planned at least 2 months in advance, where we're promoting those through a variety of internal channels, internal social channels. Of course, we have distribution list emails, things like that. The corporate e-newsletters, we go into people's meetings and say, hey, can we have 5 minutes to talk about this? So there's a variety of different avenues that we have to promote those as well.
And if you want to talk about OCM and actually changing the way people want to desire to build on your platform, this is a low-cost, effective way of doing so. It's just generating that buzz. And that's one thing that we continue to do, even with budget cuts across our project. And we had to move some of our OCM budget more into our training budget. We decided that we would continue with this speaker series because it really was a low-cost way to engage. And we have, phenomenal turnout at these events. These are lunchtime events or late afternoon events, and we'll get 200, 300 people on these events, and then we only have about a 20% people who actually leave the event, and it's usually because they're an hour and a half, so most people can block an hour on their calendar, but they can't stay for that last 30 minutes. But we're still getting great feedback from these events.
And it fosters that culture of continuous learning too. It continues to expand on that, which is huge when you have technology that constantly changes and evolves too. So let's talk a little bit about the asynchronous content, the on-demand content, and some of our best practices there. So first, one-stop shop. Train them where to go, things in one place. That is really important. We use Confluence. It's where a lot of our audience already lives, so we've built that ecosystem up and that site up to have all of our resources, whether we're sharing links to external content and things that maybe live outside of Confluence, to things that we've built internally, training materials, documentation. That's where our events calendar is. You can get contacts for who to talk to on the team if you have a question. Just about anything that you need is in that ecosystem. And I'll tell you, start that as soon as possible. The rework is not fun.
Be organized.
If you've got a lot of content and a lot of things all over the place, we did have to do a little bit of that up front, but luckily we did that relatively early on, so we were able to build on that rather than spend time moving things around and trying to create that experience. Another one is leaning into external support. We talked about this a little bit. Again, thinking about the returns. Develop what you have to. For us, a lot of what we spend time developing training for, it's things that are custom to Cardinal that we can't get outside. So exactly how we've set up our architectural patterns, our safety or security processes and procedures, things that are specific to us that you can't go out and get somewhere else. Confluent does an amazing job with training. There's a lot of free on-demand video courses. If you go to training.confluent.io, developer.confluent.io, I have those memorized. I've spent a lot of time on those sites. A lot of great resources. There's also great paid resources as well, but a lot of awesome free stuff out there. And a lot of organizations, if you go into your HR learning management systems and things like that, a lot of companies have purchased external catalogs, whether that's LinkedIn Learning, Skillsoft, Udemy, Open Sesame. You might recognize them under other names in your organizations based on how they've been branded, but there's a lot of great foundational content out there that use what you can there and supplement. And staying concise and focused. So when you can stay concise and focused, we work on more bite-sized learning, that micro-learning, the just-in-time resources. The nice thing about doing that is you have a plug-and-play approach. So if someone just needs that one little piece, they can go find that one little piece and move on with what they need. You can also take those and plug those into larger paths for a more guided, comprehensive journey, which is great. I will also say, I know we have a couple senior engineers here. Feel free to raise your hands. They help as all of our great with subject matter expertise for a lot of this content. Very busy guys. And so by doing the concise, focused, bite-sized learning, that's how we're able to get through a lot of those deliverables too. So let's talk about the learning paths. So the plug-and-play approach, where we're able to craft these, our enablement approach relies pretty heavily on learning paths when we're looking at how to fully upskill teams and specific roles to build those internal capabilities to ultimately enable the performance so teams can go out and tackle their own use cases and do all the great things that are possible with event-driven architecture and streaming solutions. So you'll see we have 7 here. The paths do cater to all roles. So we've set this up in a way that if you are someone who's maybe in a business-facing role or you're in an IT support role and you just want to know, like, what is this EDA stuff that's being talked about? What is Kafka? I don't know what this stuff means, but I support these IT teams that are doing this stuff and I want a little more information. That's where we have the introductory learning paths to start out. It provides that conceptual kind of introductory foundation for what we're doing at Cardinal and what all this stuff means. And then as you progress through the paths, they build on each other. So you start getting into more of the tech fundamentals. We get into the platform and architecture that's specific to Cardinal. We talk about security, of course, that's paramount at Cardinal. And we want to make sure that we're talking about security before we get into the design and development of those event-driven architectures and streaming solutions. And then we have our 7th path that's focused on monitoring and advanced topics to continue with that self-support model. So with all of these paths, they have required content. We also allow for optional content. If you think about things, for example, our developer path, you think about all the different languages that can be used to develop event-driven architecture and streaming solution components. So we want to make sure that we have the core information that needs to enable the performance objectives that are set for every path, and then we provide additional resources. We've also phased the rollout of these so that we can continue to develop as we maintain these paths. Again, things constantly evolve. We're always looking at how to improve. We have the paths do live in confluence in our ecosystem, and we've also made them redundant in our corporate learning management system for our improved visibility and tracking of those. We partner with the Cardinal Health corporate L&D team to help with a lot of that. And they're open to everybody. If you have a Cardinal Health login, you can access these. We don't restrict them to anybody, and we also open the paths before they're fully launched. So for example, the 5th path is something we're gonna launch next month. We have 1 asset left that we're still working on. You can go in and you can see and consume everything up to that 1 last asset. So really a holistic approach to kind of bring together everything we're doing from a performance enablement approach is really what these learning paths are about.
Yeah, and a couple things to add on to what Sherry said. One with OCM, remember, first you build the desire to change, but then you also have to start celebrating wins. So every one of these paths has a recognition wall. So if somebody completes this training path, we put their name up. We also have some swag that we send them, just to say, hey, thank you for taking this training and developing yourself and moving forward. And finally, the aspect about anyone can take it. I mean, at least at Cardinal Health, our contractors aren't allowed to use our learning management system. So if you have good contractors and consultants who are supporting these teams, but we can't give them, a paid-for education. We can at least put this stuff on here that has been cardinalized, and they're able to see exactly how we use Confluent Cloud and Kafka and all the other components within the Cardinal Health ecosystem. So now we've just opened up this learning path to everyone within Cardinal Health, and it really can allow us to now, push all of this training and all of this development out to our application teams.
All right, so taking a look, again, communication is critical. We can create the best programs in the world, the best paths, the best learning, but if no one knows about them or no one knows where to find them, the point's kind of moot, right? So it's important to make sure that you don't neglect to promote, and that's a key effort where we spend a lot of time and attention. We use multiple channels. I mentioned that with the live events, not just emails. It's going into meetings, it's talking to people, it's the internal socials, it's all sorts of things to be able to draw attention to things, to reach as many people as possible. And we make our communication stand out. When you think about how many emails you get in a day and how much time you spent reading, I know there's been a ton of surveys and research done on how much time people spend on an email. If that's your only way of telling people about something and you send 1 email out, it's not going to be effective. So we spend a lot of time focusing on this, making things colorful, of course within Cardinal brand guidelines, but we make it colorful, we get to the point, we keep things as concise as possible, and by leveraging that multi-channel approach too, people have started to recognize we've kind of built our own brand with that. So they see EDA and they pay attention.
We have our own logo.
What's that?
We have our own logo.
We do have our own logo.
That's right.
Yeah, we do.
The cheetah, Cardinal Health EDA. You saw it at the spaceship.
but it's made out of ones and zeros.
Yeah,
awesome.
It's pretty cool. Personalized communications when you can. You're not going to be able to do this for everything, but anytime you can recognize someone, talk to someone one-off, tag someone, celebrate something, thank them for their help with whatever it is that they helped you with, that really does go far, and that builds people that want to work with you and just expands what you can do as well. And again, pairing with that user-friendly ecosystem. So when you are going through our communications, you'll always see a link to our Confluence where people can go to get everything else. And it's just, you have to have that kind of working both ways. So again, just making sure to take a look at those communications, really think through that strategy to ensure that all the hard work that you're doing is reaching all your people.
Yeah, and one thing about promoting your solutions, very early on in our strategy, we stood up an EDA advisory board made up of VPs across all of our business units. We hand-selected these individuals who understood the technology and what we were trying to accomplish with the strategy. And we also then always promote our training, because this is free training for all of their employees that are underneath them. And this is actually building up their capacity to now be able to develop within this is going to be the single integration middleware layer across Cardinal Health in the future. So they have to know how to do it. And guess what? They don't have an L&D budget to send people out to the Confluent training. So with us, we've now cardinalized it and we put it on there. And the links on every one of my signature blocks, it's got our Yammer site, it's got our video archive, and it's also got our Confluence site so that people can go immediately to find that training.
So talking about KPIs, right? It's important to measure and make sure you're showing your success. We talked earlier, we have 58 applications that have onboarded 60% of the largest enterprise IT projects, hundreds of Kafka topics, producers, consumers, connectors. All of those have been implemented, but to really make the case to show that performance enablement and what we're doing in that kind of training and performance realm is impacting that's where we look at these KPIs, and we look at them very regularly. 100% of our learning path, the people who are completing those, have reported that those paths have positively impacted performance. 100%. That's awesome. Scrap learning, that measures when you take a training, how much will be used on the job. Anything that's not used, you consider scrap or waste. 27% is what we're seeing from our learning paths. I think one of the latest numbers from Gartner that did research, it's a little dated, but it was 45% is pretty common, and that's the average. 96% desire additional learning paths of those who have completed them. And I will tell you the 4% that were missing from that were managers that probably only needed the first path. Yep. So, I'm going to say 100% there.
I've taken the first path. My name's on the wall.
Yeah. In the first 6 months of launching the learning paths, our Net Promoter Score was 80%. Net Promoter Score, if you're not familiar with that measures the likelihood of someone to recommend training or whatever it is that they're consuming. So great numbers there. It's 8, 9, or 10 out of 10 ratings for us. The consumption, so we keep talking about Confluence and that ecosystem. The numbers have actually gone up since I did the slides because they were due last week. We're almost at 5,000 monthly views from the last month across our content ecosystem. And over the last year, that's a more than 300% increase in engagement across all of our Confluence and all of our ecosystem there. So that's great. We talked earlier about the Tech Talk attendees. 196 is current. That number fluctuates up and down a little bit, around 200. And then in our corporate learning system, we talked about how we make some things redundant in that system from what lives in Confluence. We have, it's almost 500 now, I think, and 74% of those interactions are completion. So, really great data to show that our training and performance enablement approach is working and contributing to those larger moves that we're seeing in the organization with EDA. But Chad, I'm going to turn things over to you if you want to kind of focus on some key takeaways, and then we'll get into Q&A, because we've got about 2 minutes.
We've narrowed it down to, if you can just remember spec, you should be able to realize what we were trying to say today. So number one is develop your strategy. Figure out whether you want to have a very small core team that does all of your development within your Kafka ecosystem, or do you want to federate that out and you want to really accelerate growth? For us, that was an easy solution. We wanted to accelerate growth because we have a huge industry. Invest in your provider partnerships. So Confluent, as I said, have been great partners along this journey, and they already have content created. So they've already been out to talk to other customers who have already been there on this path. So they're probably going to say, hey, go talk to Cardinal Health because they've had great growth within their ecosystem, but you probably don't have access to those information. Plus, as you start looking at doing those tech talks, they have these wonderful experts who can come in and actually do the tech talks for you. And even my senior engineers are learning things at that point. So purposefully stand up your learning and performance ecosystem. Again, if you want a one-stop shop, try to tailor it to your organization because there's a lot of wonderful Kafka learning material out there. But some of it is fundamental, some of it is Apache Kafka, some of it is very old, but still good fundamentals. But how does that play into your networking, your security environment, your risk posture? So all of that can be tailored down into your ecosystem. And then constantly engage with your audience. So we constantly are posting on Yammer, which is our internal social media platform. We're constantly sending out email blasts to those groups of our EDA Tech Talk attendees. So we're constantly trying to engage. And now finally, now that we've started building those skill sets within the application teams, my teams can now focus more on the higher level stuff. Instead of doing the transactional development that they were doing at the beginning of the project, now they can start taking on those beneficial use cases that aren't part of a funded project. And that's key. If you're going to continue to see growth within your ecosystem, you need to get outside of what you can do with simply funded project or funded investment projects. So now we're standing up, just next month, we're going to start up we're calling it, we don't know what we're going to brand it because we can't use Shark Tank, but the idea is that developers can come in, once a month and they can pitch their idea about, hey, I've got a great business case. I think that we could really solve this art of the possible question that our business unit is struggling with. And if we believe that it's something that can be done quickly and with relatively low input from our team, then we'll be able to partner with them and to then grow that system even more. So again, strategy, your provider partnership, your ecosystem, and constantly engaging. So if you can do that, I think you'll be successful. And with that, thank you very much. Thank you, Sherry. Sherry has done an incredible job for us over the last couple of years, building all of this wonderful content. Her engagement is ending with us in June. I will lose sleep at night because I don't know how I'm going to maintain all of this, but it is fantastic.
Thank you.